What is up, everybody? Happy New Year. It is Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast 2025 edition, the first one of the new year. An exciting one because it is the last week of the regular season and we are ramping up for the playoffs. He's Ryan Talbot. I'm Matt Parrino. Shout, as always, is brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. And right now, let Tops do the cooking and you'll be the real MVP. Visit shop.topsmarkets.com and elevate your food game with a great selection of custom cakes, desserts, pizza, sandwiches, fresh fruit, cheese trays, fried chicken, and so much more. Save time and easily shop with convenience of no fee pickup on all the game day deals. There are no service fees, no tips, just the best deals in town. Score great deals in time for kickoff at shop.topsmarkets.com. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing great. And as you said, Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to all of the Shout insiders and everyone watching the podcast live here. We appreciate you all.
Aaron Prevost throwing down just because super chat at $1.99 to start things off. If you want to throw down a super chat, as always, we will feature those comments and discuss them as well. We got to start with Terrell Bernard because this was something that was dropped on our plate today. Sean McDermott on Monday said the Bills came out pretty healthy out of the game on Sunday. 2 days later, Terrell Bernard is not practicing, somewhere between day to day and week to week. Well, Sean McDermott did kind of peel back and say it's probably closer to day to day. But again, it's a concerning development. He suffered a quad injury against the Jets right before the Bills are about to start the playoffs. This was, in a lot of ways, part of the downfall with the defense last year when Terrell Bernard wasn't able to go. So now the panic button has been pressed amongst Bills fans asking, all right, how long is this going to be? And Sean McDermott kind of said he didn't know if they needed to play on Sunday, how Bernard would make it through the week. But it's definitely a concerning development and opens up the door for Joe Andreessen, Buffalo Joe, to start, which he probably would have anyway, even if Bernard wasn't injured, but something that we got to now monitor going into the playoffs.
Yeah, it's something that obviously, as you mentioned, happened last year. It's something where Bernard seems to get banged up a lot, and he's a smaller linebacker, man, in terms of his overall frame. Going into last season, we didn't even know who was going to be starting opposite Matt Milano because Terrell Bernard missed a chunk of training camp in the preseason with an injury, and he ended up getting named the starter and had a tremendous season. But then late in the year, he missed some time. They had to lean on A.J. Klein when they were without Milano, without Bernard. And, I see the comments in here already about deja vu happening all over again. The good news is Sean McDermott classified it somewhere between day-to-day and week to week. So you hope that with this extended time off, with the rehab and recovery, he'll be good to go on Super Wildcard weekend, but it's definitely something to monitor.
And I think, if you're looking at this thing long-term and him being in between those designations, you hope that he's back for the divisional round and just being able to maybe get through it if it's something where somebody else would have to play in that spot. And it's going to be interesting to watch this weekend. And I want to get more into Bernard and the long-term prospects here when it comes to him and an eventual deal. But this Sunday could be the first time we get a chance to see Joe Andreessen and fifth-round draft pick Edifon Ulofoshio. I spoke to him after practice today. He went in the locker room after practice, grabbed his helmet, got back out on the jugs machine, so I made sure to stop him on his way into the locker room, and it seems to be like he's preparing to play, an opportunity where, early on, a lot's coming at you when you first enter the NFL. All these guys have different levels of acclimation early on, and for some it takes a little bit longer, but this could be interesting because, you're probably not getting the linebacker number 6 in the playoffs from a depth perspective, but we kind of played out this story again last year, and like you mentioned, it ended up with A.J. Klein playing meaningful snaps.
Yeah, they're not calling A.J. Klein off the RV this year, so they're going to have to go with guys on their own roster. And, they have a veteran option in Nick Moreau who can play a certain role, certain responsibilities. You're hoping Dorian Williams will be good to go for the entire playoffs. Matt Milano continues to get better. And if that happens and you have Milano and Dorian Williams, you're feeling okay about the linebacker position, but you just don't know when you're going to need that depth when things can pop up. We've talked about Milano and the injuries that he's had. Dorian Williams is playing at less than 100%. He's been dealing with some injuries this year too. So that next man up mentality is a real thing. And, Joe Andreessen, first and foremost, Sean McDermott was very complimentary of him today and talking about the preparation. But you saw even in the game on Sunday, he comes in and he ends up leading the team in tackles despite entering the game, so late into the process. And I get it. It was a backup for New York with Tyrod at quarterback, and he was flying around the field going against Jets backups too. For the most part, they had their star wide receivers on the field at that point in time too. But he seems to have a nose for the ball. And now Ulofoshio, you're hoping, can come in and show what he can do. Those guys both have high athletic profiles. You don't want to necessarily have to depend on them in their rookie seasons come playoff time, but this is going to be a good audition for both.
It will be. And, when it comes back to Bernard here, peeling back the layers of this injury and potential situation, availability is the best ability, right? Like, you want your guys, your important key pieces, your captain on the defense, to be available in the playoffs. And I think this is something that does kind of play into the long-term conversation with him. Can you trust at his size to be able to make it through a 17-game season, stay healthy all the way through, and then be available for you, down the street? Because listen, I know a lot of people want to see Joe Andreessen. There's going to be a drop-off there against playoff caliber teams. One of the things Joe was talking about today is like he's watched and marveled watching Terrell Bernard pre-snap, being able to read his keys, like all of those reps over the course of the season. You can't replace those, no matter who you have to ask to go into the game. So that is something that I think the Bills have to consider. But on the other side of the token here, and this is like an interesting kind of comparison, Matt Milano, if you remember back 17, 18, even early 19, he really struggled to stay healthy too. And that's sometimes I think guys have to get a couple of years in, figure out how, what it takes to get through a season and do the right things to get their body in the spot it needs to be. And I'm sure Terrell Bernard has done everything he can to get his body ready to play for this season, but there's something that you can't replace when it comes to years in the league, all of the experience. And then Milano went on a pretty crazy run there of like 2 or 3 seasons where he was available most of the time.
Yeah, this could be bad luck. This is a young player. But over these 2 seasons, we've seen time and time again some injuries pop up, some time being missed, some key games being missed. And like you said, that was one of the main reasons why people felt like the Bills lost to the Chiefs last year in the playoffs is they were dependent on A.J. Klein to play a big role at the linebacker position, a guy that hadn't played pretty much the entire season. He was a step or two behind Travis Kelce and company in that matchup, and it really hurt the Bills' defense in that game. So, like you said, this could just be something where the next year or two, we're talking about Bernard being one of the healthiest linebackers, making plays all over the field. But right now, it's something you have to monitor and keep in mind for a player that eventually down the road here, sooner rather than later, is going to need a new contract.
So Joel here on the YouTube channel with a super chat. Josh Allen is the MVP, no doubt. Book it. We had quite the conversation on the MVP a couple days ago on the show. We won't go too deep into that, but I wanted to shout out Joel on the super chat. We appreciate it. Does Lamar playing in a very important game for Baltimore this weekend? They want to secure the division. Although if Pittsburgh loses in that first game, or does Baltimore play first?
Well, I believe it's Baltimore. From what I was reading, Baltimore plays first. So really the Steelers could be going in with nothing to play for.
Yep.
But to answer your question about Lamar, if he doesn't go in there and just wipe the floor with a terrible Cleveland Browns team, I think it hurts him. If he does, it doesn't necessarily help him because this is a bad Browns team. A terrible quarterback. They're going to have advantageous field position because the Ravens defense is going to swarm and you would think keep them from moving the ball very well. So with great field position, I'm sure Lamar will post some great stats, but I'm finally starting to see some of the voters or the, media members saying has a lot more to do with, if you don't just look at the stats overall, look at what each team is playing with. And I'm not trying to bash any of Buffalo's starters, the talent around Josh Allen, but there is a little bit of a difference between where these guys were drafted, the All-Pros, the Pro Bowls, the Hall of Fame type players that each team has on their offensive roster next to their quarterbacks. O-lines are pretty similar. I think Buffalo's is better, but the Baltimore's is no slouch there. Allen has been able to do this with expectations of a rebuild season, expectations of a year where everyone thought they were losing the division, or most people thought they were losing the division to the Jets, the Dolphins. He has exceeded all expectations, has them at 13-3. I know he's going to, play the first series of the first few snaps to keep his consecutive streak game alive. But win or lose, I'm not going to count this toward what the team's record is or give Allen credit for this last game against the Patriots, obviously. But to go 13-3 with the expectations where they were, I think that says a lot about Allen. And, I agree with that analysis. He should be the MVP.
Yeah. And I think to me, sometimes when you have this complicated debate, sometimes it's good to strip this thing down to the studs and get to the most important part of the conversation, which is most valuable player. I don't know how you can make that argument for Lamar when he has Derrick Henry in the same offensive backfield as he does. So I'm right there with you. I got Josh Allen for the MVP. We'll see how this thing transpires. Carl Tommen on YouTube. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you, Carl, and everybody watching. The Bills are Super Bowl bound. We'll find out. The tournament starts very shortly here. So it's going to be exciting to cover and for all Bills fans to watch. Let's stay in the defensive side of the ball, but let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about the safety position because you have Damar Hamlin returning to practice this week, or he's limited. Sean McDermott basically said on Monday he's expecting him to play this Sunday, and that's important to get him back ramped up because he's missed a couple weeks here, and what that potentially can mean. Because I think Taylor Rapp probably sits down and you still go with Cole Bishop, the rookie. But looking beyond that, what do the Bills do at the safety position if Damar Hamlin and Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp are all ready to go? Is it Hamlin just goes back in as the starting safety opposite Rapp, or do the Bills consider making a change to the rookie? And you mentioned Sean McDermott talking earlier today about how much he's been impressed with Joe Andreessen. He gave those same flowers to Cole Bishop, even mentioning in the meeting rooms this morning, taking notes. Cole Bishop taking copious amounts of notes and starting to really understand the process of what it takes to prepare for a game week. And I know Bills fans are a little bit disappointed about Micah Hyde basically being, or some Bills fans, I shouldn't say all, about Micah Hyde basically being brought in to be a player coach. I mean, he is literally spending all of his time or most of his time with Cole Bishop, trying to give him as many nuggets as he can, provide that veteran leadership. And every time it's brought up, whether or not, Hyde could factor into things, Sean McDermott, pours cold water all over that. So I think it's these three guys going into the playoffs, barring any injury, and you still have Cam Lewis in the mix there as well. Do you think the Bills should seriously consider Bishop over Hamlin if all guys are healthy?
Yeah, they should absolutely consider it. I don't know if that's ultimately the right call. I think that Sean McDermott could play both guys, make them interchangeable depending on the packages, the personnel, what the other team is in a down and distance. And when I say personnel, what kind of talent the other team has at certain positions where, Bishop was supposed to be this guy that could cover tight ends and has the athleticism to do a lot of different things. You could probably be more successful blitzing with that, with Bishop than you can with Damar Hamlin. Hamlin's a safe choice. He plays where, he knows his role. He does a great job of it. He doesn't get beaten deep. Tackling percentage favors Damar Hamlin, but obviously the snap count favors him in a significant margin between the two in terms of their tackling percentages. Some missed tackles by Bishop along the way, but you also drafted Bishop in the second round. And I do feel like had Bishop not suffered that injury at training camp, he would have been in a good spot to start or at least get handed the job early in the season. He was behind the eight ball a little bit because of that injury. And he talked today about how it's the first time he ever had a serious injury like that in his career. And it hurt him in terms of his chances of, winning that job out of the gate. So, I think Sean McDermott would be foolish not to at least consider it. But you also have to see how Damar Hamlin looks this weekend against the Patriots in his return. You don't want to just go based on what have you done for me lately, which Bishop's been out there, been flying around a lot, or have that recency bias. There were a lot of really good things that Damar Hamlin did this year that I think a lot of fans gave him credit for. There's still some football fans that don't necessarily see that from Hamlin. I think he's more of a reserve. I think he's actually had a really nice season this year.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. I mean, we've both spent a lot of time, beating back some of the critics on Damar Hamlin this season. I think he's been everything that he was in 2022 and better. Like, I mean, this has been a guy that has taken an obvious jump in 2 seasons, former 6th-round pick, thrust into a starting role a couple of years ago. We've covered the whole story. I think to your point, he's been really solid for the most part. Has he gotten beat on a couple run plays? Sure. But things are about to get ramped up quite a bit. And I know Cole Bishop has played really well over the last 3 weeks. And I like the ascension that we've seen as he's gotten more reps and as he's gotten more comfortable. But once you face the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens, like those are kind of offenses where the communication is going to be key. Being able to kind of understand things on a more on a higher level than, I think still Cole Bishop, you can make the argument he's still trying to figure things out there. There was a play last week watching that game back. It was I think it was a play in the red zone. It might have been the incompletion from Aaron Rodgers to the ankles of the tight end. And it seemed like it was a miscommunication. Cole Bishop kind of, fell back to try to guard the deep part of the field. And all of a sudden he looked to his right. There's Taylor Rapp, and they're in the same like quadrant there. And then you look over, nobody's covering the tight end, and he's got to quickly pivot to try to get down. Those are the kinds of things that I think Damar Hamlin, with all of the reps this season, is a little bit more second nature at this point. Now, what I do think the Bills should consider, if I'm Sean McDermott, is how do I get Cole Bishop on the field? Does that mean maybe getting him into that dime role so you can like have him play up in the box on a couple of certain plays? Even when you want to defend the Ravens in round 2, I think a lot about this, or even round 1, potentially against Denver, who you have Bo Nix, who's a mobile quarterback, can move around. Get him in the box where I think he could be really good near the line of scrimmage. And then you're doing both things. You're getting him more important experience, but you're still relying on the guy that kind of got you there, that you trust in those big game situations.
And I love that. And that goes back to what I said. Find a role for Cole Bishop, for his talent, for his skill set, but go with the guy that has shown to have great communication with Taylor Rapp this season, that has not been out of position or out of place. Both guys could potentially miss meaningful tackles and have at times this season, but Hamlin's definitely been consistent enough where in these meaningful games, you want someone back there that's not going to get beaten deep or have a crucial miscommunication like the one you mentioned against the Jets. And, Bishop's first game against the Texans, I don't like to keep bringing that one up because that was his first start, his first live game action. But you don't want something like that to happen in the playoffs, because once you get behind, or if you get behind in these playoff games, it's tough to catch up.
Thank you so much for watching. Almost 1,500 across all platforms on this Wednesday late afternoon. Is it late afternoon? Early afternoon? Just afternoon. I think we're just at mid-afternoon. All right. Very nice. I want to get to Andrew's super chat here, and we will in a second. But before we move off of this, the Micah Hyde conversation is an interesting one, because I think everybody thought going into these last 3 weeks there was going to be an elevation for him. And it seems to be that we're trending in the direction that that's just not going to be the case. And in a lot of ways, it feels like he was brought in here to be a player coach, to work with Cole Bishop, to be a part of the team. And I don't know if we're on the road to Micah Hyde having any playing role for the Bills in 2024. Do you take issue with that? Do you think that the Bills should have approached this any differently, or is this about what you expected?
I won't say it's what I expected when they signed him. I thought maybe you would get him in this game against the Patriots in week 18, see what he had left in the tank, see if maybe he could be a potential elevation option in the playoffs where there are unlimited elevations, especially based on the fact that you've been so banged up at the position. But at the same time, I'm not opposed to it. One, Micah Hyde clearly agreed to this when he re-signed with the team. I doubt they laid out any other kind of version of this for him, saying, you have a chance to come in and start. They're not going to say that. They probably told him, we want you to kind of coach up Cole Bishop and be on this roster. You've been here since day one of the Sean McDermott regime. We want to give you a chance to win a Super Bowl ring. And if you're a veteran, especially a guy that was dealing with some neck injuries and issues like that, why not sign on the dotted line, collect that practice squad paycheck, work with the players, practice with the team, and just give yourself that chance to win to hoist the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the year, to win that Super Bowl ring, because he's meant so much to this team over the years.
Yeah, I'm not really surprised. Like, honestly, I think that any football that Micah Hyde has left in the tank, there's like that the hourglass like that's running out, like it's
Right.
very close to completely running out. And so I don't think that you want to waste any of those snaps if you do end up needing him in the playoffs, like it's going to be for a short run, a short amount of time. You think about AJ Klein last year where they brought him in off the couch off the out of the RV, like you
RV, yeah.
mentioned, they were going on vacation. That's like the worst possible situation when a guy's been out of football for a couple of months. He was with the Bills in training camp and everything, but they basically brought him out of retirement in a lot of ways. And that's what the Bills did a couple weeks ago. So he's gotten ramped up. Micah Hyde has. He's practicing once again. So I think that gives you a baseline to be able to evaluate him. And maybe the fact that he's not getting called up is also a result of the evaluation that's ongoing, and maybe getting him back in the building. Maybe they need more time to get him ramped up, or maybe he's just never going to get back to that level where they feel comfortable putting him out there.
Exactly. You know, the weight's up to where it needs to be, but you brought someone in late in the season where, yeah, I think if they were both parties were more serious about him playing, it would have happened sooner in terms of the practice squad spot, the ramp up period, the acclimation to the scheme. Yeah, he knows the scheme, he knows the system, but you know, fitting in potentially with the new players, the communication aspect of it. There's a lot that goes into it, despite him being a veteran who has a ton of experience under Sean McDermott in this system. I feel like this is kind of the role that they laid out for him, and it was a break glass in case of emergency. Then we could potentially get him out there on the field, and they haven't had to get that far just yet.
Thank you so much for watching on this Wednesday. We really appreciate you making us a part of your day. If you want to take your Shout fandom to the next level, you can become a Shout Buffalo Bills insider right now. All you have to do is text 716-528-6727. It's a 2-week free trial, $3.99 a month after that, and it basically gives you access 24/7 to myself, Ryan Talbot. You got a question, you got a comment, you want to talk Bills, you want to talk about life? I don't know. Whatever you want to talk about, you could do it on the Shout Buffalo Bills Insider text line. It's brought to you by Carrie C. Byer, attorney with the law offices of Francis M. Litro, located at 237 Main Street in Buffalo, New York. If you or someone you know is seriously injured, give them a call, 716-852-1234, or check out litrolaw.com. Super chat from Andrew Price. Since we're talking about Josh MVP, can we please mention him being voted most overrated player by his fellow NFL contemporaries before the season? Honestly, is there a funnier, like, 4-month NFL storyline to track than that one is? To start with the commentary around that, like, I still remember Brandon Beane, I think it was 5 months ago, being just pissed off.
Yeah.
When Sal
Idiots are
Mayorana,
everywhere.
what's that? Yeah, there's idiots everywhere. That's what he said when he was asked about, can you believe there's somebody out there that thinks this guy's overrated? And then the job he's done, like you mentioned earlier, it's not to bash any of these players on the Bills. There's a lot of really good players. I mean,
Right.
you look across this roster, and there's been some really important performances this season. You think about James Cook and the fact that he's on the doorstep of history within the Bills organization. You think about Amari Cooper since he's come over at the trade deadline. You think about Khalil Shakir, who has a chance. I think, does he have a chance to go over 1,000 yards?
I don't feel like
I don't think he
after
does.
the
I'm
last
gonna look it
few
up.
games.
But with that, whether or not he does or not, this was a group of players that were absolutely bashed all off season long since the Stephon Diggs trade nationally. And what Josh Allen has done and the way that he's brought so many guys into the mix, raised the level of play. That's just another kind of feather in his cap when you talk about the MVP.
Yeah, you said it well. There's nothing wrong with the players that Josh Allen has at his disposal. But you're talking about a rookie second-round pick that missed over a month of action with a wrist injury. Khalil Shakir, who you saw the chemistry with last season, and he's ascended into a much larger role. They get rid of an all-pro, Pro Bowl wide receiver in Stephon Diggs. They let the number 2 receiver, Gabe Davis, walk in free agency. Dalton Kincaid has missed some time this season and hasn't necessarily even went out there on the field, followed that trajectory of what we saw from him as a rookie. Mac Hollins has been a great addition in terms of the locker room presence. He's made some key plays for this team on offense, but he's done a lot with a supposed drop-off in talent compared to the receivers that he had at his disposal last year, what you saw from Kincaid as a rookie. But he's made it work, and he's made everyone around him better. You've seen some picture-perfect passes down the sidelines to Keon Coleman, and to Coleman's credit, he wins those one-on-one matchups. You've seen the spectacular jaw-dropping plays week in, week out, the latest being one against the Jets where he scrambled around through it last minute downfield, put it in a spot where only Coleman could get it, but Coleman dropped that ball in that specific instance. But we've seen it so many times this season that Allen elevates the players around him. He's the least sacked quarterback, or I believe this season in terms of how many times he's been sacked, which a lot of it's the O-line playing better, but a lot of it is his escapability, and it's always been a big part of his game. So he just does everything so well that it's easy to see why, in my opinion, he should be the favorite for that MVP award.
Pops Mafia with a really good question here as we continue to move through a couple topics on today's show. Who are the Bills going to call up off of their practice squad on Sunday? Because if you think about this,
yeah,
it's going to be challenging because the Bills, and Josh Allen alluded to this today, there's a few position groups where starters are going to have to be required to play. And if you look across, this group here, there's some really interesting decisions the Bills have on their hands here. Number one, I think wide receiver. You're going to want to bring up a wide receiver because, Amari, if Curtis Samuel can't go, you're looking at Cooper, who you probably don't want to play in this game. Shakir, you want to probably avoid playing in this game. Mac Hollins is a guy that I feel like he'll want to be out there just because of who he is. And I think getting Keon Coleman more reps, fine. I don't love the idea, but, you're going to have to play some guys. What do you think about KJ Hamler as a guy after all of these weeks and weeks and weeks and everybody else kind of getting an opportunity on this team? Maybe he gets the call up. And another question that Carl Tomlin asked and a couple other people asked, who will be the 14th touchdown recipient this year to catch a touchdown pass? That could be KJ Hamler, I think. There could be a couple guys, but that's one to throw into the mix.
Hamler makes sense from the practice squad. Hasn't really had those elevation opportunities or the opportunities on the field when that's his name has been called. You could go big, a big boy touchdown, Alec Anderson, one of the O-linemen that are in this. But the elevations from the practice squad is really interesting, Matt, because Mike White you'd think is going to be in play. You need probably a backup behind Trubisky. He'll be that. I don't know if you can label him as the third emergency quarter. I guess you could if Josh Allen is the.
No, I don't think they're going to, because then Josh, I guess you could have him as the emergency quarterback, but Allen would still have to play if Trubisky gets hurt.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So that's a tough one right there. And I guess, you're probably going to be a very run heavy game plan no matter what. You don't want to be putting your receivers at risk on Trubisky balls down the field where, not a knock on Trubisky, but just quarterbacks in general, backup quarterbacks, they throw those emergency room balls a lot of the time, putting their receivers in danger. I don't think the Bills want to do that. So Hamler makes sense. You might want to bring up an extra O-lineman if you want to keep some of your key starters out of action. Those are two positions that I would look at.
The other place I would go to, I get offensive linemen, but I do think a couple of guys will start in this game. I think an Osiris Torrance probably goes. Yep. Maybe Spencer Brown, although I'd really think long and hard about that. You got Cedric Van Pran-Granger that can play center. You got Alec Anderson that can play left guard. You have Ryan Vandermark that can play left tackle. I would go to the defensive side of the ball potentially and bring up Casey Toohill, somebody that you can elevate off of your practice squad, because you don't want Greg Rousseau playing in this game, Von Miller. And then all of a sudden you're looking at your edge numbers and it's like, that's going to be a big haul of a day for Javon Solomon and potentially AJ Epinesa. DeJuan Smoot still with that injury. You don't want to risk him getting hurt at all. So I think getting up a guy like Toohill that can play a huge lion's share of the snaps. And then on the interior, I think you could sit Daquan and Ed Oliver, and you could just rotate, Austin Johnson, Dwayne Carter, who's still kind of ramping back up, and then Jefferson and Jordan Phillips.
Yep. Plenty of there. And I see someone in the chat, pounding the table for Frank Gore Jr. I saw that a lot on X this past week too. I don't see it happening. This is probably going to be a big Ray Davis game. Give him a workload. Give him a lot of snaps. Ty Johnson can get worked in. And I know they're both important players to the overall depth of the running back position, but you can only elevate so many players from the practice squad. I just don't think that they use one on the running back position. I've been wrong before. I could be surprised and it could happen. I just don't see it happening. I think the edge position, is you brought up, that makes a lot of sense too.
The only thing about the running back that I'm not a huge fan of, bringing up that guy, is you have options. Like, you could really hand the ball off to Reggie Gilliam, who, by the way, could be a guy that you get into the mix for a passing touchdown. He could be the 14th. So there's a lot of different options. What's that?
I think Gilliam had a touchdown in week 2.
No, he was asked about it today.
Was he really? I swear I saw someone mention that he was one of them that had a touchdown. Okay, if he said no, then I take your word. Maybe someone was confused. I saw someone say
receiving touchdowns this season, 0.
Okay.
He has not had a touchdown since 2022, a receiving touchdown or a rushing touchdown for that matter. He only had one catch for 3 yards. He's had 2 carries for 3 yards this year after going the last 2 seasons without a single carry. So I think if I'm playing like daily fantasy football or putting in a little Bills action, I'm getting Reggie Gilliam on my card.
Listen, if you're doing daily fantasy sports in week 18, just stop. With all the backups that are going to be playing across the league, that is degenerate nature right there, Mr. Parrino. Putting in a Reggie Gilliam lineup. Gilliam, in terms of being the guy that could catch the ball, yes, absolutely could be that 14th. I think you could see a lot of carries as the running back position, but no daily fantasy sports lineups in week 18, football fans. I'm begging you.
Wow, man. Really coming at people that are just trying to have a little extra fun on their Sunday. All right. Moving right along.
That Reggie Gilliam, KJ Hamler ticket, that's that you're waiting to cash in on.
You never know, dude. Could you imagine just the flex it would be to just like hit on a 7-leg parlay with a Reggie Gilliam anytime touchdown? If you put a $5 bet on that, I'm pretty sure you're cashing a pretty nice ticket.
Right. Well, and the funny thing is too, you just never know, because I did see someone else say in last week was the fantasy championship in most leagues, and how Tyrell Shavers outscored Cooper Kupp in the championship. If you looked at the points that he got, obviously 1 catch, 69-yard touchdown is going to get you a nice little fantasy stat line, but you just never know in this day and age in terms of how much a player is going to score on a given basis in those fantasy leagues, the daily fantasy sports leagues, all of that. So stranger things, as you said, have happened.
Look at Whiskey bringing the absolute heat in the YouTube chat comments right now. Smash the like button, he says. Also, speaking about smashing the like button, be sure to smash into the new year with Tops Friendly Markets world famous Bison Dip, a perfect side to a Bills win. How did you do? He asked me, how did I do? Whiskey, you absolutely crushed that. Although I don't know if Tops has their own Bison Dip. I'm a big fan of the what is the Bison Dip? What's the brand? Shoot.
Bison. You mean the competitor?
Oh, it's by Bison. Yes, it's by Bison. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if you meant like a competitor like Hell of a Good or Wappa Bison Dip. Yeah. That's when people leave this area, it's one of those things that they miss the most. I have a lot of friends in Georgia. I have family in Arizona. And whenever they come to visit, it's like the first thing they buy at the store is the Bison Dip. And you can't get it out there. They offer shipping across, the continental United States and all that. But it's like $40 for a thing of Bison Dip, which I don't know how you can justify that. It's delicious. Don't get me wrong. Big fan, but definitely worth stopping at Tops if you are in Western New York.
Little super chat here from Carl Tommen. We need a big man touchdown from an offensive lineman, Alec Anderson. How does that sound? It'll be interesting to see. I don't think he was on the injury report, if I'm not mistaken. So he left the game, returned. Looks like he's all good. That could be an interesting one. The only thing I wonder about the big man touchdown is who ends up getting it, because who's going to be active, number one, on the offensive line. And then number two, if Anderson is asked to play like left guard or center, he's not really going to be available. So
maybe Richard Garage, if he was one of the elevations,
Ooh.
get it, the car in the garage. I don't know. I'm trying to come up with something witty there for the 14.
You've always kind of come out with the garage puns, so I really appreciate that.
I'm a big Richard Garage fan. I think that could be a sneaky 53-man roster addition next year for the Bills.
Good question here from Michael Partham, one of our regulars at the Shout live shows, which, by the way, get it on your calendar. The weekend, we don't have the exact date yet, but the weekend of the wild card round, we are going to hopefully be at Wingnuts, 1402 Millersport Highway. So get that in the calendar. Get ready to come out for the big wild card weekend party before the party really gets going at Highmark Stadium, whenever that game is scheduled for. Partham asks, do you think McDermott cares at all about the Patriots potentially earning the number 1 overall draft pick?
I mean, I'm sure you care, but his main focus is not the Patriots. And, they've already hit on the quarterback position, so this is a skill player. It could be a top defensive player. And you don't want to see your division rivals keep stockpiling picks like that, but they're not going to throw the game, that being the Patriots. The Bills aren't going to try to throw this game. They're just going to be resting starters, and they're going to let the chips fall where they may. But I just think that it's not maybe high on his priority list or his concern list until down the road, if they hit on that number 1 pick, or if they trade out of that pick and gather a lot of other assets from teams, it's going to definitely speed up their rebuild and make them probably the top competitor, as you and I have mentioned, to the Bills sooner rather than later.
I think to me, the biggest concern outside of like who they get it, because it's not the quarterback. So like you got to have belief or fear, I should say, that, their power structure is going to make the right decision on who ultimately they draft, or maybe trading out of that spot if somebody wants to come up and get a quarterback. It's kind of a funny year for quarterback because there seems to be, two polarizing guys at the top. I don't know if there's going to be anybody clamoring like last year. Like New England probably could have made a killing had they moved out of that 3 spot, somebody come up to get Drake May. But that's the bigger thing for me. They have their quarterback. The bigger concern I have if I'm the Bills is like, who do they get for their head coach if they decide to move on from Jared Mayo? Because right now, as things are positioned, I think you're fine going forward. I still think they're going to be a competitive team as we move forward. I think they have the money and the assets to improve their roster. Just because of what they have, it doesn't necessarily mean anything for who's making the decisions. But I still think when you have Josh Allen, you're not too much worried about what else is going on in the division, just because you have now 6, 7, 8 years of evidence of just being able to compete year in and year out.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Well said there. And we had questions in the chat about Bernard. They missed the start of the show. It is a quad injury. Sean McDermott listed him as day-to-day to week, somewhere in that range. Out on Sunday against the Patriots, and to be determined in terms of Super Wildcard Weekend.
Yeah, we'll track that. My read on it is it's an injury. It happened in the game. Sean didn't bring it up on Monday. He's not practicing today, and they're already ruling him out. When asked the severity of it, he kind of middle ground it between day-to-day and week-to-week, but then kind of came back and said it's probably closer to day-to-day. So in that situation, I think that puts you in a good spot moving towards next week, and him not playing this week, not having to force it. That's a lot of times too. Like the Bills didn't have the luxury last week of having a bye week to rest injured players. So I think he probably gets himself ready and right for the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It's a whole extra week of rehab, essentially, getting what needs to be done for the work done on that quad, not having him have to practice this week or forcing him out there where if this was a meaningful game or a playoff game where he might try to gut through it, this is just a chance for him to heal up and get healthy.
Where do you want to go next, buddy?
Ooh, good question. Well, we've kind of hit up a lot of the questions. I always like to look at the chat, see if there's anything in here. I guess maybe we can turn our attention to James Cook. Do you think that they're going to at least try to get him that one other touchdown in this game, maybe on that opening series? Or is this something where they're just, much like Saquon Barkley and the Eagles, where he's not playing this weekend, he's okay not breaking Eric Dickerson's record that Cook's okay if he doesn't get that one more to tie O.J. Simpson?
I think he's going to play only because I think it's something that you've already seen behind the curtain and that it does mean something to him. They were trying to get him a touchdown last week. I think they'll probably not rush him a ton. I wouldn't be surprised even if, like, to your point earlier, Ray Davis gets the start, comes down the field, and then they just put James Cook when they're there at the goal line, doesn't get a ton of carries. Pops Mafia makes a good point to observation too. He is close to 1,000 yards. So do you want to let him run a little bit in this game as well? But man, can you just talk about the air coming out of the balloon if you run James Cook out there and he somehow gets injured in this game?
Yeah, that would be a significant loss for the playoffs. You don't want that happening. You can't have that happen. So maybe it is, you're using him sparingly. You're just trying to give him a few carries. And if you get down near the goal line, that's when you call his number again so he can at least tie that record. And if you can break the record, even better.
Remember you said a few minutes ago, we were talking about something. You said, I've been wrong before. You know what? One of the biggest instances of myself being wrong in recent Bills analysis, Chase Claypool. I think that's my biggest L of the last 2 to 3 years. And listen, I always own up to my L's. Like I believe strongly in that. When you put your name on something, you better kind of own up to it at the other end of things. And in the chat right now, EC says, coming out of minicamp, Chase Claypool sounded like he was doing really well. He was never signed by anybody after the injury settlement. Was the injury worse than led on, or is there an attitude issue? So my perspective on that is he had an opportunity which felt like in a lot of ways the last opportunity, right? Like if he didn't cash in on this one, it didn't seem like there were too many teams interested in bringing him around after what transpired in Miami. And, I don't know where the status is. I don't know if he's signed on with anybody like potentially Canadian Football League is something that I heard bantied about. I don't follow those transactions very closely. And you could talk about a couple of workouts on Tuesday in a minute here that you wrote about and noted to our insiders. But I think the Claypool experiment is just like, it's just faded out. It's a guy that came on, had one really good year, had an opportunity in Buffalo. A lot of people said some really nice things, but in the end, when it was time to really put up or shut up, he wasn't able to get on the field.
Yeah, it did feel like the last opportunity for him. He showed up pretty well early on. Then you have, the injury occur, missing the time. I just think it was something where a lot of teams didn't necessarily have him high on their list in terms of if injuries came up, and he just might be content to not being in this league anymore, and or at least this season, and try to restart all over again next year. Who knows? But haven't heard the name in terms of workouts that I've seen. Might just be ready to call it a career at that point. Real quick, I mean, I wonder how our friend Marcel is doing watching this game in person. I know he's there. Arizona State is making a comeback.
Are they? They were down by a couple scores.
They're within 8. They picked off Texas, and then they just had a huge play down the sideline where it was caught. I believe it was. I don't know who caught it. I thought maybe for a minute because I'm kind of looking up there. Caught it, got face masked and interfered with, and still now they're at the 8-yard line, so 2nd and goal now for them, and they're within 8 points. So 5:11 left. He must be on the edge of his seat.
He's at the game.
Yeah, I saw a picture. That's what I'm saying. He must be like.
And our friend Catherine Fitzgerald from the Buffalo News, also an Arizona State alum, who was pretty excited about the game. So I hope the Sun Devils come back and get a dub for our friends. Why not? Yeah. Go get it. Plus Texas. Who needs to see Texas advance? I've seen Quinn Ewers play a couple times. I'm actually surprised that they haven't gone to
Manning.
Arch Manning there.
Yeah,
but
I like Manning's overall game a little bit better too.
Final thought. I'll give it to you.
Yeah, final thought. We're going to try to come back tomorrow with our 3 big questions. If we can find a time to make it work, we'll have you set with the preview. Definitely not a meaningful game come Sunday against the Patriots, but still plenty to talk about for the Bills and their potential playoff opponents as we get ready for some games over this weekend on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, and on the 3 big questions, this is the time to join to become an insider, because this is your participation potentially in the show. What we do is we put out a call for questions, big Bills questions. We read through all of them. We usually talk about one or two of them on the show, and then we bring on what we think is the best question of the week. We bring that person onto the podcast, and they participate. We've done a couple of them so far this year. So text 716-528-6727. Get your free trial. Send in a question for the big question, the 3 big question episode tomorrow, and we'll bring you on if you have the best question. All right, Slider Sunday. Get ready your way with King's Hawaiian at Tops Friendly Markets. Every Sunday is an opportunity to enjoy delicious sliders made your way, and now you can win big while doing it. Vote for your favorite slider weekly for a chance to win tickets to the big game. Grab your favorite King's Hawaiian products from Tops and craft the ultimate sliders to make Sunday even more special. Visit topsmarkets.com/slider Sunday. He's Ryan. I'm Matt. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Take care.